Mr. Green.
Good morning.
Morning, Mr. Rice.
Good morning.
See Mr. Kehoe is here as well.
Mr. Knox, after you open the meeting, I'll do my little attendance and speech.
Okay.
Okay.
As opposed to every other meeting.
Yeah, we're gonna do it different this time.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome. This is the Wednesday, January 12th meeting of the Board of Investments. It is 9 a.m. Linda, would you please read any announcements and then call roll to confirm attendance?
Yes, thank you. 1 second. Thank you, so I have Santos, but it's Chair Knox. This meeting is being conducted as a virtual meeting, so I will do a roll call of the trustees to confirm attendance. Mr. Knox,
I am here.
Mr. Green,
Present.
Mr. Kehoe,
Present.
Ms. Greenwood,
I'm here.
Mr. Jones,
Present.
Mr. Miller. I know he was here early. I'll come back to him. Mr. Kelly,
Present.
Ms. Sanchez,
Present.
Chair Santos, or soon to be Chair Santos, Mr. Santos, Mr. Miller. Okay, I don't see him. Staff participating in the meeting include the following: CIO John Grable, CEO Santos Cramen, DCEO Luis Lugo, AEO JJ Popovich and Laura Guglielmo, Chief Counsel Stephen Rice, Interim Chief Financial Officer Ted Granger, Chief Audit Executive Richard Bendel, Senior Staff Counsel Christine Roseland, Legislative Affairs Officer Barry Liu. Investment staff include James Rice, Chris Wagner, Jude Perez, Esmeralda Del Bosque, Ron Sankandwa, John Kim, Jeff Gia, Didi Acevedo, Derek Kong, David Chu, Cheryl Liu, Bruno Piccinane, and Martin Wolf. Consultants include Makita Investment Team, Stepstone Group, Alborn Team, and Bob Klausner from Klausner, Kaufman, Jensen, and Levinson. Trustees, please use the Zoom chat option to be placed in the queue. At this time, we ask all meeting participants to mute their mics until you're ready to speak. And now we may proceed with the agenda.
Thank you very much, Linda. Before we move on to the agenda, I just wanted to again welcome Mr. Miller to the Board of Investments. You did a brief intro before the committee meeting. Did you want a minute to introduce yourself to the full board?
I appreciate that. Again, my background is in public finance investment banking, about 40 years doing that, and very happy to be here representing the second supervisorial district. So that's.
Great. Thank you. Welcome. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Moving on to item 2, we actually have 2 items under ratification of officers. First is a recommendation to update the Board of Investment seniority list to reflect 0 years of service for outgoing board members that served in 2021. There is a memo dated December 29th, 2021 with the background on that. And unless there are any questions, I'd be happy to entertain.
I'll move the item.
Moved by Mr. Kelly.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Santos. Linda, please call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Miller, Mr. Miller, Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Sanchez, Mr. Santos,
Yes.
okay, and Mr. Miller, are you?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Linda. Item 2B is a recommendation that the board ratify the slate of officers for 2022, which consists of Mr. Santos as chair, Mr. Green as vice chair, and Mr. Kehoe as secretary.
I'll move the item.
Moved by Mr. Kelly,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Santos. Linda, please call the roll.
Okay, Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe?
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Sanchez?
Aye.
Mr. Santos?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Linda, and congratulations to our officers for 2022. Before I turn it over to Chair Santos, I will turn it to Mr. Kehoe as Secretary for the election of committee members.
Thank you, everyone, and congratulations to the new officers. We have two items, which is going to be the election of the Joint Organizational Governance Committee, and they will move on to the Audit Committee. So first, I'd like to open nominations for the Joint Organizational Governance Committee.
I will nominate Liz Greenwood.
I hear Liz Greenwood. Any additional nominations? Hearing none, then I will take a motion to close nominations.
So moved.
And without objection, since we have only one nomination, we will consider this ordered. And we will move on now to the Audit Committee. We have 3 positions available for nomination, so I will open that up. Do I hear any nominations for the Audit Committee?
I'd like to nominate Ms. Sanchez.
I hear Ms. Sanchez. Do I hear additional nominations?
I'd like
I'll
to
nominate
nominate
Mr.
Mr. Jones.
I hear Mr. Jones. Do I hear additional nominations?
Nominate Mr. Kelly.
And I hear Mr. Kelly. Do I hear any additional nominations? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to close nominations for the Audit Committee.
So moved.
So moved. Then without objection, we have 3 seats and we have 3 nominations without objection. We will order those as the new slate of Audit Committee members. And I will happily pass on the gavel to Mr. Santos.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for having the election be very smooth pursuant to a policy that was adopted by both boards last month. At this point, moving forward with the agenda, approval of the minutes for the meeting of December 8th, 2021.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and second. Any questions, changes, revisions? Hearing or seeing no. Hold on, I have something in the chat here. Let me see. Okay. Seeing no request to speak or any suggestions for changes, roll call, please.
Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe?
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Sanchez?
Aye.
Chair Santos?
Yes,
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
great. Thank you very much. Any report on closed session items?
The report out will be posted on LACERA.com after the meeting.
All right, thank you. Moving forward, public comment. Linda, I believe that we do have public comment.
Yes, we have received one request from the public to address the board. We will be moving in Thomas Cohen into the meeting. And Mr. Cohen will have 3 minutes to address the board. Mr. Cohen, can you hear me? Please enter,
Yes.
start. Okay, perfect. Okay, you can start now.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Tom, and I'm a union steward at LACERA. The other LACERA stewards have asked me to come forward today and make a statement on behalf of the many staff who have approached us over the last several months, expressing fear and disbelief. We will also be making this statement at the next Board of Retirement meeting because we believe it is not just important, but imperative that we get this message to the policymakers at LACERA. We feel like we have exhausted all other forms of communication with management and have communicated this message to them many times over the last 6 months, only to be met with stony looks and blank stares. Therefore, we humbly come before the boards. We are deeply concerned with management's decision to force a premature return to office on January 31st, despite the ongoing Omicron surge that is beyond anything else we have seen in the last 2 years. 1 million people a day are testing positive in this country right now. 1 million. 135,000 are hospitalized. Thousands are dying each day. If anything, this is the worst it has ever been. So what is the rush? Have we not proven time and time again our ability to work remotely? The investment funds are near all-time highs, and members are being served quickly and efficiently by staff using the new techniques and technologies we have developed over the last 2 years. Do you not agree that we are good at our jobs? Using technology effectively has allowed us to complete our mission, communicate with one another, and thrive. To deny that we have the capacity to work remotely is a form of Luddism. Can you truly guarantee our safety? Management has bragged about their physical preparations for a return to office, including new air filters and social distancing rules. Do you not know that 1 million people are dead? Yes, perhaps only 1% of those who contract COVID die, but if we have 300 employees, then that means 3 employees could die. Is that worth it to you? Are 3 deaths worth the vanity of filling an office? What about 10? What about 100? How many deaths would it take for you to realize this mistake and undo your actions? Yes, most of us are vaccinated, but that doesn't mean we won't perhaps get very sick or pass it along to our loved ones who may be immunocompromised. My wife is currently 8 months pregnant. Should I bring back a deadly disease to my newborn daughter? It is unclear when children under 5 will be eligible to receive the vaccine. Is that worth it to you that I sit at a desk at 300 North Lake instead of in the safety of my own home? But that isn't the only story. I'm speaking today on behalf of all staff. They have come to me and the other stewards and expressed their deep concerns, their fears, and that they feel unheard. Don't you realize that the most safe we can do our jobs is still from home? Why won't you compromise with the immunocompromised? What is the rush? Again, I ask, what is the rush? Thank you.
Mr. Price, I believe you are requesting to speak.
No, his hand was down, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Any other comment?
We don't have any other public comments.
All right, thank you. Moving forward, the next item on the agenda, item 7, CEO report. I will ask Mr. Krymian to address the public comment that we just received in your comments regarding your CEO report.
Be more than happy to do
Mr.
that.
Krymian.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to do that.
Thank you,
First, before I address the comments, the public comments, I first want to thank Trustee Knox, Trustee Kelly, and Trustee Bernstein for serving in the leadership role of 2021. I thought we appreciate your hard work and your patience in addressing a lot of the issues that impact our members and the fund. And so I appreciate that. And I also want to congratulate Trustee Santos, Trustee Green, and Trustee Kehoe for accepting the leadership role in 2022. There are a lot of items and issues that we're going to have to address as an organization. One of them being how we respond to COVID, and whether or not we should be moving forward with opening up LACERA. So there are a lot of things to unpack on the comments that were made by Mr. Cohen. First of all, I do want to point out that the one item that my staff has spent a considerable amount of time on over the last 2 years, actually the number one thing, has been the safety of our members. And how do we respond to COVID? I think that if you look at our record, and I'm very satisfied, quite frankly, with the approach that my staff has made, the questions that they've asked, all of the logistical issues that needed to be addressed. After the SACRS conference, there was a discussion as part of the administrative group. And I do want to point out that I believe LACERA is the only remaining pension fund that has not required their staff to come back to the office. But that being said, we've been very, very diligent about how we are going to open up the offices. Originally, we were supposed to open up back in June of 2021. We delayed that. We decided to open up again after school started, in deference to a lot of the staff that have children and had to get them back into school. We delayed that to October. Then we delayed it again because of the ongoing concerns in terms of infections and transmissions. We delayed it one last time because we needed to negotiate a contract with the Fulgent folks, in which we have done. We're in the process now of collecting data. We're in terms of people's vaccination status. We've now provided training to staff on how to test. And that's the email that went out at the beginning of January to staff. So we've done a good job, I believe, of making sure that our number one priority has always been to protect the health and safety of our staff, the health and safety of our members. Last week, actually 2 weeks ago, I did close down the Member Services Center because of the number of cases that of infections in the broader community. I didn't want to expose my staff, and so that demonstrates that we are listening to our staff. But I think that the one thing that that we need to understand, or at least the discussions that we've been having, is when is the right time to open. So I have not made the decision to definitively open the office back up on the 31st of January, which is the date that was set as part of the email that went out earlier in the month. I'll be making that decision on the 24th, which is next Monday. We had delayed opening the office back up until January 31st, which we were anticipating a surge as a result of the holidays and a result of people spending time with their families and friends and so on and so forth. And it was a wait and see scenario. And so we're still in the process of evaluating that. It has nothing to do with whether or not we believe that our staff is not competent or are not doing a good job. We believe that they are doing a good job in the circumstances that we find ourselves in. I think that it's a difficult decision, and quite frankly, it's one that I take very seriously. I have to weigh the business needs of the office, what our members' needs are, and the health and safety of not only the members, but also of our staff. And so we will continue to make sure that we open ourselves up to any suggestions that staff may have, but ultimately we do have to open. And that's the decision that, for better or for worse, I will need to make on behalf of the organization. I take it very, very seriously, and we will do what we can to make sure that our staff is safe, that we adhere to the social distancing requirements that are suggested by public health officials. We have upgraded our air conditioning systems, ventilation systems in the building. I believe that we've taken all the proper steps to make sure that we are safe as we possibly can in the office, while in the office. So with that, I'll be more than happy to stand for questions.
Mr. Green has a comment or question.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Kryman. I appreciate your comments. It's a really scary, dangerous time. I spent yesterday morning, early about 5 in the morning at LAUSC Hospital, and spent the whole day kind of working with the Board of Supervisors and the CEO, because the Omicron variant has made it very, very dangerous for our folks that are workers. So I want to acknowledge Mr. Cohen's comments and just acknowledge and support that the health and safety of our employees really comes first, as well as the people coming in to visit LACERA. And while business operations, and we need to keep the train moving and make sure we're meeting the needs of the folks that LACERA depends on. It's really hard to do that when people are scared about dying or becoming infected. So I would just kind of reaffirm Mr. Cohen's comment and ask my colleagues on the board to really listen to what he has to say. And we do need to develop a plan. We're the appointed and elected leadership of this organization. We do need to give direction to our managers to make sure that our employees are safe. I know that I sent a letter last week to the board and the CEO asking to expand teleworking options for the 55,000 people that I represent, to make sure that people, if they're having to quarantine, that are testing positive, are being accommodated and not being AWOP time. So I don't want to talk out of both sides of my mouth. I'm not going to say one thing for LA County employees, nothing for our LACERA employees. So I would just ask my colleagues to really listen and come up with a plan that keeps our employees safe, while at the same time continuing the business operations that are important. But I was really moved what Mr. Cohen said about having an 8-month pregnant wife that is at home, and even there's a slight chance that he brings that virus back to his family. That really affected me. So once again, ask my colleagues to consider his words and come up with an action plan to protect our employees. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Any other comments?
Can I make one comment?
Yes, sir.
I think that we completely agree that the health and safety of our staff is of paramount importance to us, and I believe that we do have a plan in place that that maximizes the protection of our staff. We have accommodated. Actually, we've accommodated many individuals on our staff. We do not AWOP folks. We do allow them to telecommute when they are quarantining, for example. And so we have been very accommodating in that regard. And so that being said, the majority of the infections that we are seeing is not workplace related. It's individuals that are contracting it because of their daily life activities and so on and so forth. The gatherings that they're going to, the daily activities that they have to conduct in order to live their lives. I am sympathetic of Mr. Cohen's concerns about contracting the virus and bringing it home. I have 3 kids of my own, for example, and one is in high school, 2 are in college. They are being required to go back in person as well. And so I do have a segment of my staff, about 16% or 20% of them, that are represented employees that have to come in as a result of their activities that don't lend themselves to telecommuting. And so I want to be fair and sympathetic to their plight as well. And we will do what we can to accommodate everyone that we possibly can. We are eventually going to have to come back. And so is right now the best time? Maybe not. We still have another week to see how things are going. Things are not trending in the positive direction. But we'll make that decision on the 24th. And so we do have a plan. I don't want anyone to think or go away assuming that we don't have one, that we have not been thinking about that, because we have. And like I said, over the last 2 years, it's the #1 issue that we discuss on a daily basis with my executive team. So thank you for that.
Ms. Greenwood?
Thank you, Chair Santos. And I want to support our employees. I want to support our staff. I want to support the union. This discussion hits a tiny bit close to home today because I have a family member who dislocated his shoulder twice at the end of the year and ended up in a rehab facility, and this morning tested positive for COVID. And this is a man in his late 70s who hasn't left his house in 2 years to avoid getting this. So I just hope that we all pay attention to the fact that this particular variant is highly contagious. And yes, everybody's going to have to come back to the office either full-time or in some sort of hybrid situation. I am not sure that this particular moment is the exact right time. And would encourage staff to really examine what the numbers are both nationally and locally. And if we can postpone this decision until this particular variant passes, maybe that would be a good idea. Other than that, hello everybody and Happy New Year. And I hope you are all safe and well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Greenwood. Any other comments? Seeing none, I do have a brief comment. I get it, Mr. Kryman. It's a big responsibility, but everybody's scared. All of us are scared. I mean, we face the same situation in my department, the Public Defender's Office, and I just don't want us to be in a situation that my department was. My department head was adamant about everybody coming back to work, back to the office. Rather than people going to court and go straight home, he wanted everybody in the office. Now we have many lawyers who are infected, and he had to reverse himself. So it's a scary moment. My own family, a lot of them are infected. Got another kid who's pregnant and just got infected. So it's not whether the people are getting infected at work, outside work, is that eventually, just like what happens in our homes, right? One relative gets infected, nobody knows about it, and then we all get infected. So the same thing here. If somebody's infected, they come to work. The problem, as you know, is that we don't realize that we are sick because at the beginning it's very mild, or maybe it could be asymptomatic, but yet still contagious. So people are really scared today. I'm not downgrading what management thinking is, but I think we should slow down a little bit. I think the comments made by the shop steward, which I want to emphasize, should not be retaliated against in any way whatsoever. I would be highly upset if I get a bad report with regards to that. There's freedom of speech, and he certainly has the right to speak up for his employees. But anyway, just slow it down a little bit. Let's see what happens. I know that's what you said, but when you telegraph or tell the employees that at the end of the month, you're looking at coming back in the middle of this pandemic, it will scare anybody. It will scare me for sure. So just slow it down, Mr. Kryman. I know that you have your best interest for the organization. I appreciate that. But we need to be balanced in terms of how the employees and the morale of the employees versus the pandemic, and implement any measures to come back in a very thoughtful, methodical, and calm. We need to be calm and make the decision. We need to bring everybody together. Thank you. Any further comments?
I have one last comment. I apologize, Herman. I couldn't jump in before you started. I think from my perspective, and as somebody who is also present at work, I can tell you that my own experience is that, you know, my parents are teachers in Texas, and they are present in school. And my father, who's 72 years old, has caught COVID. And so, you know, I think that and the upside is that he was vaccinated and boosted, and it was a very mild experience, but nonetheless, it is a very real thing. And I think the sensitivity here that was raised is the notion of being a carrier back to an unvaccinated individual, where there is significantly higher risk than to vaccinated individuals. And I think, Mr. Kryman, when you're kind of considering how you want to implement flexibility, I think sensitivity to that particular area is important. People who have immunocompromised within their household, where the vaccine doesn't get them up to the same levels of protection, and where you have children who have not yet been vaccinated because they are simply not, they're not eligible. I think those are particular areas of sensitivity that we should hear from the comment and listen to. However, we have to balance that with the need to be able to get to some semblance of reality. And I think there's also a broad belief that this will eventually just become endemic and it will be something that we live with as a population. And so we will have to learn how to do that. And I think when vaccinations are broadly available, that's quite a bit easier. So maybe that might be a point of sensitivity that you might be able to address when you're considering your flexibility. So that's just my comment for sort of helping to balance the need to run an efficient organization, as well as the need to be sensitive to particular areas of concern. And I think, it's one thing to let everybody out of coming to work, and it's another to say, hey, if you have children at home that are not vaccinated, or you have a husband or a wife who is immunocompromised, we are sensitive to that, and to the extent that we can work with you, we will. So just something to think about.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. Any other comments?
Let me just say that
Mr. Miller had a comment, sorry.
All right, Mr. Miller and then Mr. Kryman.
Sure. I just would like to concur with the comments from Mrs. Greenwood and the chair regarding proceeding with caution, given the highly contagious nature of the Omicron variant. So that's my only comment.
Thank you, Mr. Kryman.
No, I just wanted to say thank you for all your comments, and I believe that that we are taking a measured approach in dealing with the return to the office plans. Right now, the important thing is that we need to get ready for the eventual reopening. We're in the process of, like I said, compiling all of the information that we need, the documentation, and then training our staff on how to test at home. And so we are taking a measured approach. We will take all of your comments, including Mr. Cohen's comments, into consideration. There's no concern about retaliation. I just wanted to make sure that Chair Santos is aware of that. Or at least my take has always been differences of opinion matter, and we take those into consideration when we make our ultimate decisions. But ultimately, we will do what's in the best interest of the organization, and we will reevaluate and send out a message to our staff on the 24th of January in terms of what we are going to do, and whether we're going to open or whether or not we're going to remain working remotely. So with that being said, thank you all for your comments and your suggestions. And I apologize to Mr. Grable in advance for taking up his time.
Thank you, Mr. Kryman. Seeing no further requests to speak, I got something in the chat here. Just give me a second. Okay, that was Mr. Miller. Great, thank you very much. We're moving forward. The next item on the agenda is the CIO report for January 12th.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. Good morning to all trustees. Welcome, Mr. Miller. Congratulations to the new officers, and thank you to last year's board leadership. Also want to thank Dale for driving the slides today. And Dale, if we could turn to slide 5, please. Here I'll start with the chart on the upper right. We remain focused on the 10-year treasury as it's foundational to a portfolio in the capital markets. It began 2021 at under 1%, finished 2021 at 1.5%. Today it's about 1.75. I'm not going to turn around and look at the tape, but there's been a rise in yield that has impacted growth-oriented equities in particular, as a higher cost of capital has an adverse impact on longer dated cash flows and terminal values. As we discussed, the spot rate of treasuries, real yields, as the real assets team discussed, which is adjusted for inflation, and the yield curve, which is at the bottom of page 6, if we can go to page 6, are critical to portfolio construction. We'll go from the bottom of page 6 to the top, in the top right, and the scale of this may be somewhat misleading or not, as we use both the left and right axes. This charts inflation, workforce participation, unemployment. The chart does not show resignations and absenteeism. That may tie into the discussion that we just had as it relates to the CEO report and public comment. There's a big impact on productivity as a result of, of absenteeism. This chart has had, as we can see, significant movement over the past 2 years. And I don't want to confuse backward and forward-looking data, but this chart in many ways presages uncertainty about future economic developments. Specifically as it relates to capital markets, there may be changes in economic regimes as it relates to risk premia, illiquidity, leverage, growth versus value, and even geographic influences and differences. We discussed emerging markets and infrastructure, that the supply chain impacts may have more macro influences. If we could turn to slide 9. Slide 9 shows the portfolio as of the end of November. November was a down month. The pension lost 0.3%, 30 basis points. We're near an all-time high of 74.1 billion. The chart on the right shows our asset allocation, our actual, and we're within our targets for all major asset categories. The next slide shows our performance, the pension at the top, the OPEB trust at the bottom. The pension continues to have positive performance against the benchmark. That certainly feel good. There's been a significant outperformance over the last year. OPEB was down 1.8% net in November. In mixed capital markets, the underperformance is greater than the more diversified pension. This hopefully will change over time with the new strategic asset allocation for OPEB. There's an RFP that we'll discuss later this morning for OPEB as it relates to introducing alternative assets. The next slide is the total fund risk report. This report in many ways shows our asset allocation at work, growth, which is where most of our risk is as measured by volatility. That's where most of our risk resides. It's about 80% of total fund risk at about just over 50% of assets. Credit and real assets are in the middle of the chart on the right, as well as our risk as relates to diversification benefits. Real assets is about 17% of total fund risk at 16% of assets, and credit is 3% of total fund risk and 11% of assets. Going down, risk reduction mitigation portfolio is precisely that. Slightly negative contribution to total fund risk, while it represents over 20% of the capital of our assets. This functional framework is logical from a fund risk allocation perspective. Later this morning, we'll have a risk budgeting presentation that will go into far more detail, much greater level of insight than what I just presented from our interns. And in many ways, the next discussion item, allocator to investor, is predicated upon us being much more risk aware, pardon me. Slide 21, please, which is the last chart or page I'll discuss, is the staff chart of the month. Here it shows the 5 largest companies by market capitalization in the S&P 500. The S&P 500 is not our benchmark. We use the MSCI All Country World Index, or the ACWI, notwithstanding that Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Tesla, and Alphabet are also the 5 largest stocks by market capitalization in our global benchmark, whereas they represent about 25% on this chart, they represent 12% of the larger benchmark. So in many ways, one interpretation of the slide is that public markets may have less diversification benefits with a higher level of concentration. And maybe the positive of that, or our reaction to that or response, is that our new asset allocation is much more diversified with less reliance on public markets, less reliance in turn on those 5 companies, and greater diversification. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grable.
I have a question, please.
Ms. Sanchez?
Yes. So, Mr. Grable, I'm curious about your opinion. Obviously, I have an opinion of my own, but if you go back to the yield, 10-year yield slide, and there, that one more, slide five, yeah. So that upper right-hand corner slide, the 10-year yield. Obviously, a lot is being made of the fact that we are starting to see a rise in yields, partially because of inflation, partially because of the Fed stance, and the potential for tapering, faster tapering than expected. However, in your opinion, and I'm not looking for a total crystal ball here, but just give me your educated opinion. How high do you really think these yields can get? You've put a very long perspective, and life was very different in 1979 than it is now. What do you think is the likelihood of where do you think these yields can reasonably get to before they sort of hit their natural stopping point?
Wow, if I had the answer to that, we would be fully funded many times over. And this isn't meant, maybe.
I get it. I
Yeah.
get it. We're all in this business. I
Yes.
totally, but I'm always looking for an opinion, and you sit in an in an important seat to sort of have one of those.
Yes.
So.
And I think that underlying the somewhat, the levity kind of in my initial response is that we're broadly diversified such that we're not fully threaded, dependent upon low rates persisting forever. And, the last decade of returns in many ways has been subsidized by ever cheapening money. And that, has benefited both public markets, it's benefited private markets, growth assets, where if you keep discounting future cash flows by lower numbers, it makes it increasingly more valuable. With that said, I think that rates, most forecasts that I read, even our asset allocation shows that I don't have that precise number on me, but I think that there is ready room for this to go up. I don't know if it's 75 basis points over the next year, but I think that there is room for this to increase. But how the yield curve steepens, recognizing that the Fed has much more control over the nearer term or the short end of the yield curve. A lot of that is a function of what happens globally and what happens with balance sheet influences, what's happening with the Fed's balance sheet, with people purchasing treasuries, which has been somewhat of a dampener that's keeping it potentially artificially low because there's this search for yield and people are buying safe, longer dated things, as are we. So I think that it's going to go up. And this isn't a precise answer, but I think that when we talk at the end of the year, I wouldn't be surprised if it was 75 basis points higher.
Yeah, so we're in the same camp. Thank you.
Have a comment, question? Apparently not. Mr. Grable, thank you very much for your report. I appreciate it. I was wondering if you'd be able to, at some point, draft an update to the members regarding to the status of the portfolio versus vis-a-vis inflation. I forwarded that email to you yesterday for response, and I thought that perhaps, if you think it's appropriate, it would be a good idea to do a full report to the entire membership, as you have done in the past, because they're getting a lot of our colleagues, a lot of the beneficiaries, getting a little nervous with regards to the inflation and the implication to the portfolio. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, we're moving forward. Item 9, consent items. So we have subsection item A, B, and C. I will entertain a motion to approve A, B, and C unless there's an objection, or does anyone want to?
So moved.
I'll second.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved on second. Seeing no questions, roll call, please.
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Sanchez,
Aye.
Chair Santos.
Yes,
The motion passes unanimously.
thank you for that. Moving forward to item 10, non-consent items, subsection 8, work plan, Mr. Grable.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Let's see if we could stay on the cover for a second, Dale. So for the past 3 years, we've presented a work plan in January to the Board of Investments. This year, this presentation combines our strategic initiatives with our high-level work plan, as the two, in many ways, must be intertwined. On slide 3, this is a recommendation, and we're recommending that the board approve the work plan as it reflects items from our strategic asset allocation, our structure reviews, and various strategic initiatives. It incorporates feedback from the Board of Investments offsite and various board meetings. Importantly, as it articulates in number 3, it helps us allocate our precious human capital, as financial outcomes are wholly dependent upon our people. And the goal of this work plan is to continue our journey towards being a best-in-class investor. On the next page, the graphic should look familiar. We began using this in our 2020 work plan. The framework details how we achieve LACERA's mission to members. And I'll start at the top of the page, where we apportion our assets through our strategic asset allocation. That strategic asset allocation balances return, risk, and liquidity in order to produce, protect, and provide the promised benefits. And I've always found that that alliteration is really hard. I wish it wasn't all those P's. Anyway, and we optimize those objectives through the 5 strategic initiatives at the bottom of the slide, which is our operational effectiveness, our investment model, stewardship, fees, and LACERA Tide. If we can turn to slide 6. The section that we're going into now will review each of those strategic initiatives. We'll talk about our accomplishments, our ongoing efforts, as well as aspirational considerations. And for years now, we've been referring to this journey as allocator to investor. This year, or in October, we modified that for the board's consideration to best-in-class investor, and to refresh what that origin and what that destination means is, in many ways, an allocator I view as being passive and delegating important decisions to third parties. An investor, in contrast, is active and engaged in all aspects of these decisions. and that there are multiple dimensions to that allocator to best-in-class investor journey, which are represented by the icons at the bottom of the page, from on the left, operational effectiveness, to tide on the right. And as we frequently discuss, that the slope of this progress really varies by each initiative, but it's important to recognize that the mission to our members really is the bedrock to this plan. So if we can go to slide 7, these slides that we'll go through are the next 10 slides or so are updated from the offsite. In them, we'll articulate the objective of each strategic initiative, as well as connect it to our investment beliefs. On this one, where we talk about enhancing operational effectiveness, this is really about maximizing the efficiency of all resources that we bring to bear on our portfolio, be those internal or external, human and financial capital, as well as technology. Slide 8. And this is an example of the Board of Investments feedback from the offsite is reflected in ongoing efforts and aspirations. Namely, at the offsite, we had a discussion about IT and cybersecurity. Key themes as it relates to operational effectiveness include avoiding uncompensated complexity in the pension or the OPEB trust. A prime example of that is real estate and structure review that the board just approved. Procedures. There's been a big focus over the last year or so on business continuity plans. We do tabletop exercises, higher expectations. Under accomplishments, we note that we've been elevating our operational due diligence capabilities. That's critical. In many ways, investment due diligence is hope. Operational due diligence is risk management. This pillar in many ways reflects a greater level of knowledge and insight into the portfolio at the total fund level and its component parts. And towards that, the Board of Investments has made significant investment in various technological tools that has enabled our level of diligence and monitoring to increase in its sophistication. Going to investment model.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question for Mr. Grable. When you mentioned the tabletop exercises, not a deep dive, but just curious what those entail and how staff participate, and any lessons learned or things you've implemented based on those?
We recently did a tabletop, and there's a debriefing session in a week or so on that, where the key focus was on our crisis response plan involving some of our key vendors, our general consultant, and our custody bank, in which how we implement a payroll and how we best manage cash in the event of certain scenarios. And I believe it went well, but it's something that we put in place, fortunately, prior to the pandemic in October, I believe, of 2019, a crisis response plan, assuming different people, including myself, were just unavailable for whatever reason, how we continue to pay benefits for months at a time, potentially years. And that's the real focus of the crisis response plan. So I think that it went very well, but it's something that as an organization, not just the investment office, that we continue to refine.
Thank you.
So we're on slide 9. Thank you, Dale. This objective is optimizing our investment model. Here we focus on competitive and comparative advantages, what we insource, what we outsource when we're active. I made reference in the CIO report to risk budgeting, and that will be discussed by our interns later this morning. How we staff, what capabilities we need to grow, specifically a greater function on cross-functional skills, recognizing that capabilities need to cross traditional asset categories. We heard in the Real Assets Committee about ESG and stewardship, but also operational due diligence and risk management. Slide 10. Over the last year or so, there's been much discussion about our co-investment program. Last year, our mature private equity co-investments had the highest returns of our major investment strategies at close to 86%. But our investment model optimization isn't just co-investments. It's how we use our overlay. We use our cash overlay to minimize active risk. It helps us efficiently rebalance the portfolio, as well as manage exposures as we transition to a new strategic asset allocation. This also includes structure reviews, which help us optimize nuances of different asset categories. We discussed asset category guidelines, and in many ways, those structure reviews are high-level frameworks that help us achieve the objectives in our investment policy statement. And my favorite phrase, really on this slide is under aspirational considerations, really is that we continue to think like an investor. Going to stewardship. Our stewardship efforts, we've really made significant progress. I'll underscore significant progress towards being a best-in-class investor. I would say that our annual stewardship report is case in point on that. I view it as a must-read. And as this slide shows, there are very detailed connections to our investment beliefs coupled with a dedicated stewardship policy. Going to slide 12, we've made progress in multiple dimensions. I'll use that ESG framework as it relates to E. We've increased our push for disclosure of climate risks. S, our corporate board diversity effort. We've made material progress there. And G, comment letters to various policymakers and regulators on investor rights. I'll go back to an outstanding educational series that we've had with our corporate governance committee. And we've really made progress across the portfolio. In public markets, we've insourced our comprehensive proxy voting efforts. In private markets, I would say that our hopes and our achievements may be more aspirational, as there has been a big push for better ESG data. I can spend all day celebrating our accomplishments in stewardship, yet I believe that our success pushes us to really have the mindset of continuous improvement. Going to influence on fees and cost of capital. For any given investment, we should always try to express that investment through the highest returning, least levered, most liquid, lowest cost version with the most investor rights. It's a mouthful. And I think that really articulates the principles back on slide 4. And Dale, we don't have to go back there, but that's about produce, protect, and provide, the promised benefits. And that's really what this pillar is about. It's not just the lowest cost, but it's the best value at the appropriate level of risk. And that really is the notion of the components of what make up durable returns. And as we show in the bottom, there are clear connections to several investment beliefs. On the next slide, there are many good things. In our emerging manager hedge fund program, we've negotiated future capacity rights. Private equity, our co-investment and secondary activity, there has been a dramatic reduction in the layer of fees. In public markets, we've negotiated and renegotiated contracts with better terms. In illiquid credit, we've established hard fee hurdles in separate accounts such that we're paying performance fees on alpha and not beta. And implicit in that, or inherent in that, is really a better alignment of interest with our business partners. We should always be mindful of strategic considerations, and that really came through in the offsite survey that was conducted. And on this slide, I have two main takeaways, which is one, that we focus on risk and fee adjusted performance. That will also be discussed by our interns in their presentation this morning. And they will do, once again, a much better job than I will in terms of explaining that. And the second item is that we should always be a term maker as opposed to a term taker. Going to Tide, this slide is different than the slide that we had up at the offsite. We've updated it based upon last month's first annual Tide update for the Board of Investments. As we discussed, Tide is a comprehensive program. at LACERA with our investment partners across our industry and with our investment holdings. Tide however, is not in our investment beliefs. Our investment policy statement, however, in which our investment beliefs reside in, our investment policy statement has a direct statement as to the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, as do our corporate governance and stewardship policy that also highlights the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and something that maybe we should revisit, and that is our investment beliefs at some point. And that was really a sentiment that was articulated in the survey of trustees at the offsite. Going to the next slide. Much of this page repeats last month's presentation. I believe our diversity, equity, inclusion efforts are best in class. DEI is part of our diligence of all managers. We're tracking more data and have more granular data than ever before. There's been tremendous advocacy by trustees and staff at industry events. Trustees and staff are agitating for change that best positions our members' capital. And we're amplifying our voice by partnering with like-minded investors. But once again, like the statement I made with our stewardship efforts, our successes really inspire us to do much more and not rest on our laurels. And if we go to the next slide, that all 5 of these strategic initiatives are key components to becoming a best-in-class investor. And pending Board of Investments approval, these initiatives will be an input for LACERA's broader strategic planning exercise. These initiatives will help us allocate resources and provide direction to building our internal capabilities. As always, we will periodically reevaluate the whole of this program as well as component parts of allocator to best-in-class investor. We'll make necessary pivots and adjustments based upon board direction. And I'll note that the appendix to this presentation provides a prospective committee calendar on a monthly basis, as well as a monthly preliminary view of high-level projects that are in motion as a result of prior board decisions and actions. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to pause and answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Graybold. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, I have a comment, Mr. Graybold. One is thank you for connecting the objective with the investment beliefs. I mean, that's really music to my ears, so to speak. The question that I have is that we had discussed in the past the reviewing and perhaps updating the investment beliefs. Where are we with that? Is that still part of the work plan, or what's going on with that?
And yes, Mr. Chair. It's something that it may be a good exercise for us to do at an offsite. And it's something that we can, in advance of that, potentially do some type of gap analysis and discuss with the board different areas. Because I think that the other area that was flagged in the offsite survey were the statement and investment beliefs about ESG, that maybe that should move to its own statement as opposed to reside solely within risk. So it's something that we plan to, with working with the board leadership, put something on the agenda for this year.
Thank you for that, and I will humbly suggest that in you planning to review the investment beliefs, I know the last time Akita suggested that we all read a book. I don't know if there is an updated book on the investment beliefs, but it's certainly, I think, in preparation for reviewing the investment beliefs on the upside, or however you think is appropriate, that if there is any books that we should read in advance of those discussions, it will be wonderful. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none. Again, thank you, Mr. Graybold. Moving forward, subsection B, Mr. Perez regarding the OPEB Master Trust.
Sorry, that was a recommendation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was a report. I will entertain a motion.
Keith, I'll move.
Item 8.
This is David. I'll second it.
It's been moved in second. No questions pending. Roll call, please.
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood,
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood. Okay.
Sorry.
Mr.
Aye.
I think that was an I. You
Yeah,
can't, I think
yeah.
she's having trouble with her microphone.
Yeah, got it. Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Sanchez,
Aye.
Chair Santos.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Linda, for catching.
You're welcome.
I'm trying to impress everybody and finish early. That's why. Anyway, moving forward, subsection B, recommendation by Mr. Perez regarding the OPEB Master Trust.
Good morning, Chair Santos and trustees. As you just mentioned, the next item on the agenda is a recommendation to approve the minimum qualifications, the evaluation criteria, and scope of work for a private markets investment search for the OPEB Trust. Moving to slide 2. Thank you, Dale. For background, the board approved a new strategic asset allocation for OPEB at the June 2021 board meeting. During the allocation process, the board refined the OPEB Trust strategic asset allocation by adding private asset strategies, such as private equity, a liquid credit, private real estate, and private infrastructure. With this addition of private markets to the OPEB Trust, it was recommended that the implementation path for gaining this private market exposure would likely be through a multi-asset mandate separate account or a manager-as-a-manager model. This is a good approach and is a good first step for the OPEB Trust given its size. And therefore, this is the reason for the recommendation in front of you today. As the previous allocation did not have an allocation to private markets, where the current allocation includes 18% to these areas. At a later date, and as the trust grows in market value and complexity, I think staff should discuss with the BOI ways to implement private assets in a similar way to LACERA's pension, including a review of resources. Moving to slide 3. Thank you. The proposed evaluation team will be made up of members across the investment division. This includes portfolio analytics, growth, credit, and real assets. So there'll be expertise across various asset categories and investment vehicles. The team will evaluate the proposals in the 2 phases listed on the presentation, with the final selection authority being the Board of Investments. Moving to slide 4, you'll see the proposed timeline. If the recommendation is approved today, the RFP will be launched by the end of this month or early February, with a planned recommendation to the Board of Investments in late Q3 or early Q4. This would then give LACERA ample time for legal contract work and develop a plan to make our first contribution before the year end, should a mandate be approved. Moving to slide 5. Slide 5 lists the proposed minimum qualifications for the search. The qualifications allow for responding firms to have the appropriate experience to meet LACERA's needs for this type of mandate, and they will also require the firms to agree to act as a fiduciary to LACERA at the start of the search as opposed to at the time of contract negotiations. And then moving to slide 6. Shown on slide 6, you can see that the RFP will be drafted and evaluated with the 6 categories listed on the slide. Keep in mind that these are broad categories and each section will be covered in more detail in the written proposal. And lastly, moving to slide 7, Dale, thank you. Here we show a high-level summary of the requested scope of work. The items listed relate to the core services that we are looking for a firm to provide. This includes portfolio construction, sourcing, investment selection, and reporting, to name a few. I know I went through that quickly, but that includes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a quick question.
Sanchez.
Yes. So from what I gather, are you looking for either a consultant or a fund of funds to, who are you expecting to respond to this RFP? Is it more of a kind of, let's say, like I said, a consultant or a fund of funds that would then position the private equity investments into OPEB?
Yeah, Chair Santos, Trustee Sanchez, you're exactly correct. What we're looking for is, it's probably one of the larger firms. We'll run the RFP to see if there is small firms that can do this, but more of a fund-to-fund model, someone that can give us access or exposure to all strategy across all portfolios. So think of more of a completion portfolio where maybe 1, 2, or 3 firms do this for the OPEB trust. And this would be a first step into just gaining exposure. And then I think at a later date, I think it would be good to review on how we gain direct exposure like we do with the LACERA plan.
Got it. I see. Okay. Thank you.
Before I go to Mr. Kelly, and that would be a firm with global capabilities.
Correct, Mr. Chair Santos.
I agree. Trustee Kelly?
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, Jude. So can we go back to the slide with the evaluation criteria? So you and I had an exchange yesterday, email exchange regarding this. You do not list the weights applied that you would intend to apply to these evaluation criteria, nor do you provide kind of a narrative guidance to proposers, meaning, we consider experience relative to, personnel, higher, whatever, cost would be the lowest factor, et cetera. Can you go through for me why you do not supply the weights here? I mean, in essence, you're coming back to the board because you say this ability to let this contract is the board's responsibility. But we're delegating to you, in essence, establishing these weights, which is a pretty material kind of factor, but there's also no reporting mechanism back to the board. Generally, when we delegate something to you, you report back to us at some point. So can you take us through why you don't establish or more specific guidance here for proposers as to what the relative importance of these rating criteria are?
Yeah, so Chair Santos, Trustee Kelly, happy to answer that. Historically, and consistent with our process in the investment division, when we release an RFP, we do not include the weights given to these criteria. As we go through a search, there are more aspects than just weighting as we go through this process. The firm does have the ability to ask us questions. So in that question period, they could come back and ask us what the weights are, and we would provide them at that time if they did. When the board first sees the weights, if they do not participate in the RFP with staff, would be at the time of recommendation. There, when we put together the package that goes in front of the board, there you would see the weights, how we weighted everything, and also our justification for recommending a firm or 2 firms to meet a certain mandate. But it has been our process to not list them. With our email exchanges yesterday, Trustee Kelly, I did search the web, and I know this isn't scientific, but I looked, I talked to Makita about this topic, and I did look at a variety of RFPs across different pension plans, across different government agencies, and there is no one best practice. It is across the board. I even found some RFPs that address the topic directly, saying we do not do weights because we want to have flexibility in this process. So I know it's not scientific, but it did seem that more firms do not list these weights versus others. I can tell you what my recommendation is for this search is the first 3 items listed on this page will probably be weighted at 25%, with items 4 and 5 being weighted together each at 10%, and the fees, the last one being at 5%. I don't know if I addressed your concerns, Mr. Kelly, but that's kind of the explanation I can give. I do think it allows the firms not to, I don't want to use the words gamemanship, but I think it puts them, it makes them answer each criteria wholly. I don't want to get into a place where item number 6 may be higher because they know it's only worth 5% or things of that nature. But
I appreciate that, but at the same time, there is a significant level of staff involvement in the process, and we have to make sure that there are enough mechanisms in place to ensure that a proposer doesn't think that you are massaging the weights in response to the proposals that you've seen. That's one of my concerns. My other question is regarding this page and the page after this. How does the scope of work wants, if you will, tie back to the evaluation criteria?
Yeah,
that was a little confusing to me.
Yeah, so for example, we'll do number 1 with sourcing, due diligence, and investment selection. And Dale, if you can please move back to 6. 1 is we want to have an organization and a professional staff, ties back to have the ability to actually source investments. Do they have the right staff in place, and do they have the appropriate organization, as Chair Santos brought up earlier, do they have offices globally? Can they source the investments? Also, are they a large enough organization? For example, do they have the risk mechanisms in place to fully put together a completion portfolio to make sure that they can look at our OPEB trust, make sure they're staying in line with our asset allocation and have those type of resources. And lastly, if we look at kind of, it all ties into their investment process, operation due diligence, and performance and risk management. So I think each of the evaluation criteria, each one of those pieces tie back to every area in the, if we go back to slide 7, Dale, into the work summary, like how do they approach each one of these sections to each section in that criteria? I don't know if that made sense.
It does. And then on page 6, given our conversation earlier about ESG, where is the evaluation of ESG in these rating criteria?
Yeah, so ESG will take place, it's the E, S, and G, so will take place in kind of 3 places here. We didn't give it its own spot like we did in the general consultant search, but it would, one, be within the organization and professional staff section. There would be questions relative there. Also the investment process, when they're doing due diligence on external managers, are they investigating how these managers are using ESG as part of their investment process? Are they taking those into considerations? And then also a little bit in 4 on operation and due diligence and kind of ongoing monitoring. How are you staying on top of this, and how are you affecting such efforts such as our tide mandate? So
given its importance to us, do you ever envision breaking it out into its own criterion?
Yeah, we have done before. This mandate, we've just decided it will be included within the questions. As head of PA, corporate governance falls under PA, and so I have direct access to Dale, who's moved with the slides, and Scott, who actually helps on most RFPs in reviewing these. But to your question, yes, we have done it before, but in this one, we just decided to incorporate it into these specific criteria.
Okay, thank you very much, and I appreciate your response to my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Perez, any other comments, questions? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move the item.
I'll move it. I'll second.
It's been moved in second. Any further questions, comments? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye, well done.
Mr. Keough,
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Sanchez,
Aye.
Chair Santos.
Yes,
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
great, thank you very much. Moving forward, section 10, subsection C, recommendation by Mr. Woskett regarding the Global Alpha Capital Management.
Yes, thank you. Good morning, Chair Santos and trustees. Happy New Year to you all. The Global Equity team has 2 items regarding its Emerging Manager program today. Global Alpha is the first we will discuss. As a reminder, per the policy, the goal for LACERA's Emerging Manager program is to hire managers that enhance total fund risk-adjusted returns by hiring smaller, promising managers that fit within the approved asset allocation. The aim is also to promote those promising managers as they grow with LACERA. Today, the Global Equity team has brought trustees a recommendation to graduate Global Alpha, one of 2 equity emerging managers. Makita's concurrence letter is in your packet. The emerging manager policy does provide guidance that recommendations for graduation would be conducted at each structure review. The recommendation is being presented today because at the time of the last Global Equity Structure Review, Global Alpha was newer and only had 2 years of history, which was too short to warrant a graduation at that point in time. Global Alpha is a prime example of the type of emerging firm we aim to hire into the Equity Emerging Manager program. As a practice, we continually provide feedback to each of our managers on how they can improve their chances of graduating. And Global Alpha has grown on its own and also has listened and to our consultation and has matured. If the graduation is approved, we will contact our other emerging manager with the update. My colleagues, Ronson Kandwa and Jeff Jia, will provide details on the emerging manager graduation, Global Alpha, and merits for this promotion. Ron, will you start us off?
Thank you, Esme. Good morning, Mr. Chair and trustees. As you may recall, the latest emerging manager policy was revised by the board in February 2020 with an added focus on manager graduations. Qualified firms would be graduated from emerging status and into the broader portfolio. If approved, this would be the first graduation for the Global Equity Program since 2006. Headquartered in Montreal, Canada, Global Alpha Capital Management was founded in 2008 and is a majority employee-owned firm. The firm is partially owned by Corner Clark and Lam Financial Group, also known as CCNL. CCNL is one of Canada's largest privately owned asset management firms. Global Alpha leverages CCNL's scale and resources for operations and compliance services. This allows Global Alpha to focus on investing and portfolio management. At the time of hire, Global Alpha's assets under management were $1.2 billion. They have substantially increased to $5.5 billion today, which far exceeds the $3 billion limit outlined in the legacy Global Equity Emerging Manager Policy, which was in effect at the time of Global Alpha's hire. As of November 30th, 2021, Global Alpha managed approximately $157 million for LACERA in their international small cap strategy. I will now hand over the presentation to Jeff, who will cover the merits for graduation.
Thank you, Ron, and good morning, trustees. Global Alpha has developed into a mature investment firm since its introduction into LACERA's EMP program a little more than 3 years ago. The graduation is warranted for 3 primary reasons. First, AUM growth. As previously mentioned, the firm's AUM has increased significantly since hiring and exceeded the $3 billion limit of the EMP policy. And I want to note that despite the firm's successful asset growth, Global Alpha has continued to adhere to the investment philosophy and process while staying aware of capacity constraints. As a result, the firm will close the strategy to new investors to ensure that they can continue to execute their strategy. Second, Global Alpha has demonstrated stable business with improving operations. The firm's founder has been thoughtful in developing and incentivizing employees through a strong culture of partnership and equity ownership. Additionally, the firm has been active in ESG and diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. For instance, a dedicated ESG analyst was hired recently to ramp up its ESG efforts. As part of Global Equity team's ongoing due diligence, we have urged Global Alpha to conduct more thorough independent audits of its internal controls. The firm has heard our feedback and is currently instituting formal audits for its system and organization controls, or commonly known as SOC 1 reporting. Third and lastly, Global Alpha has demonstrated consistent outperformance. We provided performance information in Table 3 of the memo for trustees' reference. Since inception, Global Alpha has generated annualized net excess return of 108 basis points with a tracking error of 4.48%, which exceeded this mandate's return expectation of 50 to 75 basis points with a tracking error of 3 to 6%. Longer-term statistics are also provided to show the firm's historical track record. Over the strategy composite history of about 12 years, Global Alpha has outperformed its benchmark with similar volatility as the benchmark. In addition, the strategy's higher Sharpe ratio, superior upside and downside capture ratios shows that Global Alpha's ability to outperform in up and down market environments. These are favorable characteristics that are additive to the overall global equity portfolio. In conclusion, staff recommends that trustees graduate Global Alpha from the EMP program. We have seen Global Alpha mature as a firm over the past 3 years, and the firm's graduation is validated through its asset growth, operation, and performance. Global Alpha's graduation will be a significant milestone for LACERA's effort to invest in promising investment firms early in their development. If trustees approve the recommendation, staff anticipates deploying additional capital to this strategy as part of LACERA's periodic rebalancing efforts. As mentioned before, Makita agrees with staff's recommendation and their memo is attached. And this concludes our presentation. We're happy to stand for questions.
Thank you. Any questions? comment. I wanted to thank the staff for the great work you have done. The whole purpose of not the whole purpose, but one of the key purposes of the Emerging Market Managers program is to graduate these managers into our portfolio. And so, I'm very happy to see this proposal because in the past, we had fund of funds that run our emerging manager program, and it has taken them a long time to begin to promote, which is concerning to me. And one of the concerns that I had when we decided to do this in-house is the fact that we may not be able to graduate as efficient, and I've been proven wrong. This is fantastic. Thank you very much. Keep up the good work. Any other comments?
Move the item.
Chair Santos, one quick comment. Just in terms of a communication strategy, in terms of when these firms graduate, is there a communication that goes out to other emerging managers, or how do we communicate this as a goal, right? As an attainable goal that people who apply to and who are in the program can achieve, given, so I'm just curious about how well or not well we do a job communicating the success that Chairman Santos referenced right there.
Mr. Jones, what I have seen in the past, there is a newsletter called Emerging Manager Monthly, and as we have promoted in the past in our Fund of Funds program. And what I have seen is once this information hits the news, they typically pick it up and the emerging manager community is aware.
Okay, good.
That's what I've seen.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. I believe there was a
I'll
motion by
second.
Mr. Kelly, second by
Yes, I'll second.
Ms. Greenwood. Seeing no further requests to speak, roll call, please.
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. Green, Mr. Green.
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Kehoe. Mr.
That
Kehoe.
was an aye.
Thank you. Ms. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly. That's an aye for you, Mr. Kelly, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Ms. Sanchez,
Aye.
Chair Santos.
Yes,
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
thank you very much for that. Moving
Thank you.
forward, we're going to do the last item of the non-consent items, and then we will take a break. So moving to section D, recommendation to attend the Women's Alliance for Cesena White. Any motions?
Keith, I'll move it.
Second.
It's been moved and second. Any comments, questions?
I have
Mr.
a
Kelly has a
question.
question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. The submission does not align with the education policy. So the education policy requires 5 hours of time at any one day's event, and this event only has 4 hours. So I'm not going to support it. I also think, Mr. Kryman, it would be really helpful if staff were able to develop a checklist of the components of the education policy and the travel policy that these submissions need to comply with, because then we as trustees don't have to go through all of that and look ourselves. That would be very helpful to me. And that could accompany the package, just so we see that the various components, whether it be hotel cost, whether or not the hotel, even if it exceeds the cost, is associated with the event, et cetera. That would be very helpful to, at least to me, and ongoing. But this does not meet the that requirement in the education policy.
Thank you. Any further comments, concerns?
So for clarification, Mr. Chair, then do we need an exception to the policy? In order to support this?
Well, in my view, and I will defer that to Mr. Rice, but the board does have the authority to approve or not approve this item as it is. I mean, that's my view, but I will defer to legal counsel, Mr. Rice.
Yes, the board has the ability to make exceptions for good cause.
So we have to establish the good cause on the record. How do you want us to do that?
Can I just comment that we do have a trustee that's going to be presenting as a speaker, so I think that is justification.
Great, thank you for that, Mr. Kelly. Hearing no further comments, I will entertain a motion. It's been moved and second. Hearing none.
Trustee Santos, just a point of order in response to the question before that I didn't answer, which is, does there need to be a finding of good cause? I think the motion should include that there is good cause to permit this attendance at this conference.
Copy that. The maker of the motion, I forgot who made the motion.
Yes, I made the motion. I'm happy to incorporate Mr. Rice's suggestion.
Great, thank you. What about the second?
Yeah,
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
We incorporate that. Okay, any further questions, comments? Roll call, please.
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
No.
Ms. Sanchez,
Aye.
Chair Santos.
Yes,
Okay, the motion passes with 1 no.
thank you very much for that. That concludes all the non-consent items. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to reports. Forum. I need acknowledgement. I see Mr. Knox, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Miller. We need a couple more trustees for the quorum?
If you could just announce if you're on.
Oh, yeah,
This
no.
is Liz. I'm here.
Hi, Liz. Thank you for that.
He is here.
We have 5.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, so moving to reports. Well, we have subsection 8. Mr. Kim.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and trustees. Today marks the culmination of a 12-week internship program with LACERA's Investments Division. The current intern class represents the first time that staff has paired students together to collaboratively work on 2 independent projects. The first is related to risk budgeting, which could further LACERA's risk-aware mindset by optimizing our investment model, as well as enhancing our operational effectiveness. And the second one is related to fee analytics, which, if integrated, could serve as a foundational guide in our ongoing efforts to strengthen our influence on fees and capital. I'm very excited today for our intern team to have this opportunity to present and share all of their hard work and contributions with the board. So without further ado, I present to you the intern class of 2021, Bruno Pincinani and Martin Wolf.
Thank you, John, and good morning again, Mr. Chair and trustees. The purpose of this presentation today is to walk you through the concept of risk budgeting and to explore in a brief way what a system would look like at LACERA. Presenting today will be Martin and I, interested in the portfolio analytics team. If we can move, please, to slide 4. Before we start, I just want to take a brief moment to introduce ourselves in a little bit more detail. As John mentioned, my name is Bruno Pincinani, and I'm currently pursuing my full-time MBA at UCLA Anderson, graduating this summer. I worked in financial services prior to joining Anderson, and I'm focusing to pursue a research analyst role in investment management post-program.
My name is Martin Wolf. I just graduated from the USC Master of Science in Finance program, and my career ambitions are in fixed income product management.
Thank you, Martin. And the objective of this project is to review risk budgeting and whether LACERA should consider adopting one. We'll get into a little bit more detail about what a system might look like at the functional level and exploring potential next steps. We'll stop short of diving too much into the analytics and keep this discussion to a broader look at risk allocation. The adoption of the functional asset class structure in April 2019 was the first step in more conscious risk analytics integration into LACERA's processes. Since then, the plan has selected MSCI to provide in-depth analytics and has added quarterly risk reporting into performance books. This project will represent the first foray into risk budgeting. If we can move to slide 7, please. Here in this slide, we'll walk through the 3 phases of risk management as shown below. Accurate measurement is the foundation of any risk framework. MSCI BERA1 has holdings level data and a robust system that employs over 5,000 factors to determine where LACERA has risk exposure. It provides both historical as well as forward-looking projections. Risk monitoring is a process of monitoring and evaluating changes in portfolio risk and its sources. LACERA is evolving the way it reports risk and is consistently improving the way it uses the resources available to assess it. Risk management is the final phase of acting on the risk measurements we invested so much in attaining. Examples of actions could be selecting new managers and revising manager agreements or benchmarks, and must always be based on accurate measurements and comprehensive review. If we can move to the next slide, please. Next, we'll take a look at LACERA's current market value or current asset market value allocation, risk allocation, as well as forward-looking expected return for each functional class. As we can see on the chart on the left side of the slide, our current market weights are dominated by growth, followed by risk reduction, real assets, and finally credit. These allocations are slightly off from our target weights, which is attempted to be corrected by the overlay. An important tenet of risk budgeting is the addition of expected contribution to return, which is the chart on the right side of the slide. This is a forward-looking metric derived from the assumptions given to us from our consultant, which were also used to create the efficient frontier and strategic asset allocation that the board previously approved. What you might not have seen before is the risk distribution at a portfolio level, which is represented in the middle chart. Risk budgeting is based on the theory that an asset's contribution to risk should be roughly in line with the same asset's contribution to future return. As we can see here, we're overweight risk in the growth functional category and underweight in namely risk reduction. It is important to note that differences in contribution could be explained by differences in risk and return dynamics among various asset classes. For example, the overweight in growth could be explained by the inherent added volatility that exists in the stock market compared to other asset classes. And this brings us to an important question that we would like to ask. Is LACERA comfortable with the current allocation of risk? And with that, I will now pass it over to Martin.
Thanks, Bruno. Next, let's take a look at how a risk budgeting system might look operational. Next slide, please. In 2019, we adopted a functional category scheme that places risk at the forefront of our portfolio. Each functional group has a particular purpose in our portfolio. Next slide. When looking at the risk involved in these investments, we should consider how the assets contribute to the plan risk as a whole, not in isolation. The nature of asset allocation is that correlations between asset classes make isolated figures not relevant or useful. Using BERA1, we can use each asset's contribution to the total plan risk in our analysis. Next slide. Let's look at the phases of a potential implementation. Phase 1 would include setting appropriate risk statistics and measures we'd like to keep an eye on. This could be a headline total risk figure, or perhaps something more comprehensive like shortfall risk on a plant level. Phase 2 involves setting the allowable risk targets that are acceptable to the plan. And phase 3 is integrating risk best practices across operational teams at LACERA, from portfolio structuring to manager selection. And phase 4 is a dynamic risk and monitoring system to make sure we're within risk limits and improving on our risk-aware system. Next slide. Let's take a look at how our current asset allocation process works and what a formal risk budgeting system would add. Currently, we start with a strategic asset allocation with assumptions given to us by our consultants and final target weights chosen by the board in order to minimize the risk of shortfall. These weights are given to the asset teams and managers are selected to maximize the risk-adjusted returns of each asset class. Historical risk and return metrics are monitored to maximize manager accountability and provide a feedback loop. In a formal risk budget framework, much of the process is the same. Where we're adding a step is the determination of risk targets. This is decided for the total plan. This headline figure is allocated to the asset teams based on their expected contributions to the total return of the portfolio, as determined by the SAA assumptions. Each investment team then searches for managers with this target risk assumption in mind. There can be flexibility on how much risk each manager is allocated, as long as the risk target is not exceeded. These targets are monitored on a rolling basis to ensure adherence. Next slide. Here we have an excerpt from our quarterly performance books. Using Bear 1, we have a clear breakdown of LACERA's total risk and contribution by functional category. The total risk of the plan is 11.76. As we noted on the previous slides, growth contributes the largest amount to the total risk of the plan. Please also note the difference between total risk and risk contribution on the functional level. Because of the correlations and relationships between asset classes, the risk contributions of each functional category are less than their individual total risks. Next slide. Let's dive a bit deeper into the plan's risk. In the previous slide, I spoke about total plan risk. This includes the benchmark risk inherent in the asset class, i.e. beta, which LACERA cannot control. For this slide, let's focus on active risk. There are two components of active risk, allocation and selection. Allocation is additional risk in the portfolio caused by an over or under allocation to the asset. Selection is the additional risk to the portfolio caused by an active manager selecting securities that differ from the benchmark. These two components can be controlled by LACERA to increase or decrease the active risk of the portfolio, either by shifting funds among asset classes for allocation, or selecting new managers or changing agreements with managers within asset classes. We can see here that our active total risk is 1.13, mostly from our growth category. Of the 1.13, 0.31 is due to allocation and 0.82 is from selection from active managers. Next slide. Here's a case study that examines the active global equities sleeve. We're looking at a chart comparing the market value of each manager's allocation and its contribution to the sleeve's total risk. We can see how certain managers contribute more to the sleeve's total risk than their market value allocation might suggest, while others contribute less. You can see that manager 2 has slightly above 14% of the sleeve's allocation, yet its contribution to risk is closer to 12%. Manager 9 has the opposite, more contribution to total risk than its market value allocation might suggest. This may be the case for a specialty strategy or objective. LACERA would expect to be compensated with extra return over benchmark in the case of manager 9 and less than benchmark for manager 2. This is acceptable and approved by the Board of Investments and the asset team. The objectives of this case study is simply to note and monitor the risk contributions of each manager. With an overall risk target in mind and using analysis like this, we can better monitor risk allocation and use this method as a tool to use during rebalancing discussions. Next slide. There are some important aspects of the risk budgeting framework that the board should keep in mind. I'll highlight here that a benefit would be an increased control of overall risk, and an important concern is that analysis like this depends highly on benchmark selection and data integrity. Next slide. Let's talk about some potential next steps. Here are some of the potential steps that future investment into this project could suggest. We can continue to work with our consultants and research more into the theory and implementation of a risk budgeting system. And I'm happy to take any questions before moving on to our next project.
I don't see any questions, comments. Please proceed.
Great. So our next project is fee analytics. If we could jump to slide 4, please. The project's main objective is to build a public markets fee analysis report to determine if the total fund is appropriately compensated for the returns generated by its investment managers. Throughout the presentation, we'll focus closely on the relationship between fees and returns. Next slide. In order to suitably execute its strategic asset allocation framework, LACERA balances its obligations to produce, protect, and provide the promised benefits to its recipients. In its pursuit to become best-in-class investor rather than just allocator, it has taken several strategic initiatives over the years, which are listed at the bottom of this page for reference. This presentation focuses on the strengthened influence on fees and cost of capital initiative, boxed in green. Next slide. The main objective of the fourth pillar is to maximize returns by minimizing costs across all strategies and structures by strengthening our influence on fees and cost of capital. Such an approach will help promote our focus in generating durable, sustainable investment returns. LACERA's investment belief states that actively monitoring and negotiating costs and fees to the greatest extent possible is an integral part of a successful long-term investment strategy. As such, the pursuit of low-cost passive management is encouraged, given that markets are largely efficient. That said, certain asset classes may justify the higher fees, as adequate enhanced returns associated with active management can be expected. Next slide. Manager fees are a key part in evaluating fund performance. In the industry, different managers and investment strategies use different fee structures, often to account for the various levels of intricacy among asset classes. The most common fee structure consists of asset-based fees, which are determined as a percentage of assets under management, or AUM, of a fund. They have wide application among various asset classes and are straightforward to calculate. However, given that investment managers' incentives are tied to AUM, such a structure could lead to a focus on asset gathering over generating strong returns. Performance-based fees, on the other hand, offer a better alignment of interest between managers and investors, as they're based on a percentage of investment profits. The main concern is that a structure could result in an increase in the total levels of fees paid, which is why they usually include hurdle rates and other safeguards to minimize the exposure. Performance-based fees are common in hedge funds, private markets, and other alternative asset classes. Lastly, certain investor-friendly accounts utilize customized fees, the terms of which are highly negotiable. This structure typically gives investors more leverage, allowing them to be term makers rather than term takers, although fee-saving outcomes are not necessarily guaranteed. With that, I'll hand it over to Bruno for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you again, Martin. Here in this slide, we're showing a breakdown of fees paid for public markets. As of September 30th, the fees paid to public growth managers accounted for roughly 44% of the overall fees paid. Credit managers contribute another 31% of fees, with the remaining of the public functional asset classes making up the difference. We can move to the next slide, please. For the rest of the presentation today, we will utilize three different approaches when analyzing fees. First, we calculated various performance-based ratios with regards to fees paid, and we'll use that metric to rank managers. Second, we performed a comparison analysis to evaluate each manager's management fees to peer universe of similar strategies. And lastly, we introduced active risk measures and performed a regression analysis to predict or determine the adequate level of fees paid and highlight trends and deviations from such trends. It is important to note that we're still working to refine the methodologies, and if adapted, it will be important to better test among more managers and asset classes to standardize as much as possible. We can move to the next slide. As mentioned, we'll first start with the return-based ratio analysis. For illustrative purposes, we selected two global equity active managers presented here as Manager A and Manager B. It is very difficult to find two managers which are identical from a strategy, constituent base, and risk and return mandate perspective. To ensure a comparable data set, the similarities between the two managers we selected consist in comparable assets under management, in the fact that both managers are indexed against the same benchmark for reporting purposes, and also in order to normalize and avoid any possible impact on performance caused by longer-term themes of newly conceived funds. Both managers we selected have been active for over 15 years. We can move to the next slide. The first two ratios that we're looking at solely focus on fee return dynamics, with the first one highlighting the investor's share of excess return and the second one illustrating the manager's share. For the next two ratios, the third one on this slide and the first one on the next slide, as the formula might suggest, we have introduced risk into the equation. In both cases, Manager B, for the same amount of risk incurred and fees received, is generating high return for LACERA. Lastly, we also calculated LACERA's cost of capital ratio, which highlights net of fees return generated per the predetermined actuarial hurdle rate. As shown here, Manager B is delivering more value compared to Manager A. As expected, we're seeing consistency among what each of the ratios is providing. in which manager B is outperforming manager A, all else equal. Move to the next slide. For our second analysis, we're looking at each manager's relative attractiveness in two dimensions, fees and return. We work closely with our consultant, Makita, to secure peer data from a universe of similar strategies, as well as LACERA's own managers ranking in contrast to such peers. First, I just wanted to point out 3 quick notes to consider when analyzing the data. First, there's no incentive fees have been included for managers. Second, the fee peer ranking is reflected on a descending order. So the higher the percentile, the better the outcome. And lastly, on the other hand, the return peer ranking is reflected in ascending order. After generating the ranking on both dimensions, we also computed a ratio, as shown in the last column, in which a higher value reflects better overall attractiveness. For illustrative purposes, we group the managers into passive and active, in which passive also includes strategies with a low tracking error. Then we further separated the active ones based on geographic coverage. As we can witness here, passive managers are ranked in line with each other as a result of minimal fees and similar return distributions. In addition, apart from manager 10, commingled fund accounts ranked at the lower end of the spectrum, primarily due to higher fees paid for their strategy compared to the universe averages. We can move to the next slide. For our third and final approach, we performed a regression analysis using risk data sourced from MSCI BERA1. We solely focus on active risk and determine the contribution that each element, in this case common factor, currency, and specific risk, generated to the overall active risk, as reflected in the graph on the left. We then regressed each manager's return based on their common factor contribution to overall active risk. Intuitively, we would expect management fees to decline as such contribution is higher, given that managers with high common factor contribution are differentiating themselves less with regards to active selection compared to the benchmark. Go to the next slide. In conclusion, during the presentation today, we analyzed whether the total fund is appropriately compensated for the returns generated by its investment managers, using a 3-pronged approach to evaluate the relationship between cost and performance among public markets. As mentioned, we would emphasize the need for further in-depth research on private market fee analytic methodologies, as well as further testing of proposed methodologies for the public markets before integrating them into LACERA's quarterly reporting. And with that, we'll now open the floor for any questions and comments.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Mr. Grable.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want a couple of big thanks. First to Bruno and Martin. This work is outstanding. And I think I said outstanding, all caps. I'm not sure if that was implied, but it's all caps. And the board just approved some strategic initiatives, a work plan predicated upon LACERA continuing its evolution to being best in class. I think that in many ways, the work that went into this pushes us, kind of lays down, a gauntlet for us to pick up the work and continue that evolution of what's articulated here in order to get the best outcome for our members. So I think that this work is just clearly fantastic. I know that you also pushed MSCI on some of the fee analytics because it's interesting that here at LACERA we're pushing kind of international firms in terms of raising their game. So a big thank you for all the effort. I also want to thank John Kim for the work that John and the portfolio analytics team did in terms of working with Martin and Bruno, as well as Cindy and Jeff for 2 graduates, along with Noah, of our intern program that really lead the recruiting effort just to make sure that we constantly have interns on the team here. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Grable, for those words, and thank you, Mr. Kim and the 2 interns. This is what we need. This is great, and we have a history of hiring top people that come through our internship program. So we need the fresh blood. But that's Mr. Grable's prerogative to hire whoever he wants. But any other questions, comments, concerns? Hearing none or seeing none, moving forward, subsection B, global equity emerging manager search. Ms. Del Bosque.
Thank you, Mr. Santos. Hello again, Chair and Trustees. Continuing on our theme from this morning regarding global equity emerging managers, we're here to share results from our last search for broad US, non-US, and global emerging managers. As mentioned this morning, the goal for LACERA's program is to hire managers that enhance LACERA's return and risk profile by finding those smaller firms, diamonds in the rough, if you will, that fit within the approved asset allocation and structure with the hopes that we can promote them out of the program, very much like the experience we had this morning with Global Alpha. Now, the team followed its search process, and there is no recommendation to hire a firm at this time. Makita's concurrence letter is in your packet. We do have a couple of takeaways from our experience that I'd like to share with you. First off, this search re-emphasized the importance of due diligence, especially for young, less established emerging firms. CIO Grable made direct reference to the importance of risk management and due diligence in his review of strategic initiatives and our work plan earlier this morning. The purpose of operational and investment due diligence is threefold. We want to uncover the competitive advantages of a firm, as well as their investment strategy, review their performance, risk, and portfolio fit, as well as to uncover potential risks. Now, in the later stages of our review, the team found a mix of enterprise, operational, and investment risks that collectively did not warrant a higher recommendation at this time in these firms' development. And we'll provide some details around that later in this presentation. Again, Makita's letter is in the portfolio as attachment 1. And we very much look forward to working with Makita in the coming weeks to review our experience and assess ways we might enhance our approach to the program. We anticipate coming back to the Global Equity Committee in April with options to consider, including the possibility of launching another search. Second, I'd like to highlight that through this search, we were introduced to a couple of firms that are still green, but very compelling, and that we want to continue to follow. We plan to provide feedback to firms that moved on through the search as a means to help them improve on their processes for future searches with LACERA or the broader industry. And in fact, I'd like to share that a firm that did not meet MQs at our last emerging manager search made it to the final rounds of this search for that very reason. Because of our feedback and consultation a couple of years back, they hired a strong compliance professional to set up their back office and compliance program. They created an independent review board and became a UN PRI signatory. With that as context, Ron and Jeff will go through our prepared presentation. And please note that because this item is an open session, comments are generalized to ensure anonymity of the firms. With that, I'll pass the mic to Jeff.
Thank you, Esme. Hello again, Mr. Chair and trustees. We'll go through the prepared presentation for the update. If we can move to slide 3, down please. Thank you. Slide 3 provides a brief background on the EM Emerging Manager Program within Global Equity, which I will refer to as the EM program for short, as well as on the inception of this search. As a reminder, previously, Global Equity EM program was managed through a fund of funds model. In 2017, the program transitioned to a direct investment approach. At the June 2021 board meeting, trustees authorized staff to initiate a request for proposal, or RFP for short, for Global Equity Emerging Manager search, and approved to conduct a search every 2 years. To ensure broad and inclusive search, performance requirements were removed from the minimum qualifications, or MQs. There are 2 managers currently within the Global Equity EM program with a combined market value of approximately 240 million, or 0.9% of the global equity portfolio. Now, with the approval of Global Alpha's graduation, the program will only have 1 manager now, which accounts for 0.3% of the portfolio. Slide 4, please. Slide 4 again lists the MQ for this search. Since performance hurdles were eliminated, we included compliance with global investment performance standards, or GIPS, to ensure the quality of managers' track record. Next slide, please. This slide lists the member of the evaluation team. It should be noted that other members of the global equity team also broadly participated in the discussions and provided their opinions. Next slide. Slide 6 has the detailed timeline for the search, but for sake of time, I'll pass it to Ron to discuss the evaluation criteria process and findings of the search, as well as next steps. Ron?
Thank you, Jeff, and good morning again, Mr. Chair and trustees. Slide 7 covered the evaluation criteria. RFP responses were evaluated based on a list of categories, in addition to portfolio fit within the overall global equity portfolio. Organization, professional staff, and trading and operations accounted for majority of the weight at around 60%. Investment process, performance, and fees accounted for the remaining 40%. Moving on to the evaluation process on slide 8. Starting with the first side of the page, we received responses from 29 firms. 15 firms fell out for not meeting the search MQs. Some of the MQs that were not met included the following. Firms were less than 51% employee owned. Firms had been in existence for more than 15 years. Or strategy AUM did not meet minimum requirements. Firms with alternative equity structures and single country non-US strategies did not advance to the next round. For the 14 firms that qualified, we read and scored the RFPs based on the evaluation criteria mentioned on the prior slide. 9 firms fell out due to substantial client or AUM losses, concerns with firm structure and resources, personnel turnover, high tracking error, and relatively high fees. 5 firms advanced to the next stage. In the first round interview, the team was able to clarify RFP responses, obtain a deeper understanding of investment processes and back office functions. 3 of the 5 candidates advanced onto the second round interviews. Candidates did not advance due to highly concentrated portfolios, concerns with firm operations, and volatility of managers' relative returns. The second round interviews focused on operational due diligence, which entailed a review of the firm's internal controls, compliance, and demonstrations of risk and trading systems. The team also conducted a comprehensive analysis of the firm's investment performance and portfolio risk, similar to the analysis provided by the LACERA interns on the risk budgeting and fee analysis. It is through this stage of the evaluation process that the team identified risks higher than those of firms that LACERA would typically hire. The risks are covered in more detail on the next slide. Slide 9, please. In spite of LACERA's effort to broaden NQs and remove performance requirements to make the search more inclusive, the 3 candidates that made it to the final round still exhibited numerous risks. The risks identified by the team are shown in the 4 quadrants below: organization, operations, investment, and portfolio fit. Some of the key risks centered around concerns with firm profitability and firms meeting break-even thresholds, lack of depth and experience of operational personnel, issues with firms articulating their investment process, and firms exhibiting duplicate risk exposures relative to the global equity portfolio and existing managers. Next slide, please. As for next steps, as Edmund mentioned, the team will work with Makeda to review our approach to global equity searches in the future and bring options to the board to consider. We will be meeting with Makeda in the next couple of weeks to kick off our discussions. This concludes our prepared remarks. We are happy to answer any questions at this time.
I have a quick comment. That was my fear, quite frankly, when we decided to take this program in-house, and of course, through the funnel funds, obviously there were some issues there. And I noticed that, I believe it shows that 37 firms responded, 39, 37. No, 37 products, 29 firms. So the 29 firms that respond, is that an average number of firms responding for a typical RFP? And the reason is, I know the staff and Makita is going to continue to evaluate how to improve how we access some of these firms, but I can't help but to ask, are we able to for lack of better words, expose LACERA to a broader audience in this group in order to attract, firms that may fit better with our strategy, or is it something else? It's not just limited to the number of firms applying, but rather the different issues that you raised in the performance. Do you understand my question?
Yes. I think your first question is the number of 29 firms about equal to what we've seen in the past? And it's about right. In the prior search, we had a little bit north of 38 firms that applied. But I think we've taken many steps to let the investor community know of these searches. So the searches were in publication, Emerging Manager Monthly, publication mandate where, as well as we've reached out to our prior fund of fund managers and notified them. We have a database of emerging manager firms that reach out to us for meetings, and we notified all these firms. So we've done a lot of things. I think the information is out there, but I think it's, managers fell out because of, not meeting the criteria, as well as Esme had mentioned, the due diligence that we conducted unveiled risks that would not be seen, on paper or just by, the RFP responses.
The firms that dropped off because AUM, is that because it was higher than that threshold of what I believe is 3 billion, or it was lower? It was way too low. What was the reason with regards to the AUM issue?
There were a couple AUM thresholds, and one of them is firms being less than 3 billion at the time of the search. And there were also other requirements in regards to the strategy AUM, where the requirement was 150 million.
Got it. Mr. Grable.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think just one macro comment is, I think this may be somewhat indicative that there's more firm formation in alternative assets than there are in public markets, just because the fee potential is that much greater and the challenge of outperformance is that much harder in public markets. So I remember Makita gave a presentation a couple of years back on that topic, but I think that it's not surprising that it's harder to construct this type of program in public markets than it is in private markets.
Do we need to, at some point, and you don't have to answer that question right now if you don't think it's appropriate at this point, but perhaps we need to reevaluate the fund of funds model. I mean, I wasn't happy with the previous model that we were using or the prior firms that we were using, but I will leave that to the staff and the consultant to evaluate. Mr. Festino.
Good morning, Chairman, trustees, and the staff, and Happy New Year. I think the comment CIO Grable made is quite appropriate. Certainly, we have seen more deal flow, more opportunities in the areas where margins are better. So if you're going to start a firm, it makes sense. With that being said, Makita is in support of the staff's recommendation to pause this search at the moment. If I can take a step back, as we went through the process, there's been two buckets, if you will, where we have ultimately stopped. One is manager or product specific, and examples were given. And then the second one is the issue of fit. And that is very applicable to the way LACERA currently owns the global equity pool. So taking a step back is quite appropriate. And I also echo your sentiment, Mr. Santos. Things that could potentially be reviewed in the coming year include how should this emerging manager program be evaluated? Should it be looked at on a standalone basis or as part of the global equity pool? Because today it is as part of that global equity pool. What about the issue of searches being done at a specific point in time, like has been the case in the public markets, versus an ongoing project, like, for example, happens in the private equity space? And then the third one, which I think ties with comments made earlier with the 2022 work plan strategic initiatives. For example, in this case, there was the $150 million minimum threshold for the product. Would LACERA consider seeding products where LACERA might get economics that may be better and become more of a term maker and lower the cost? So all of those could be topics that could be discussed and debated in the coming year as LACERA continues to transition and mature as well as an organization. So there is the committee meeting planned for April. So we plan to work closely with your staff in the coming weeks to address and discuss all of these. And in addition, look at what's in the universe, what peers are doing to bring the best options for you all to decide.
Thank you, Mr. Festino, for those comments. Any other questions? Hearing none, we move forward. Subsection item C, D, E are for information only. Mr. Grable, is anyone going to speak on any of this, or is it just a strictly information only?
Mr. Chair, information only.
All right, so hearing no request or seeing no request to pull any of those reports and moving forward well, I will also apply, my comments also apply to F, G, and H. No request to pull or discuss any of those reports. So moving forward, before we go into executive session, items for staff review.
Yes, so we have one item, and it was staff to provide additional information such as a checklist to the travel and education items based on the policy.
Great. Thank you for that. We're going to go to the order. Linda, would you do a roll call for go to the order?
Yes, I will. Mr. Knox?
Good morning. First, I would like to request that we adjourn in the memory of LA County firefighter Jonathan Flagler, who passed away last Thursday, January 6th, after being injured fighting a house fire in Rancho Palos Verdes. And then secondly, I would just like to congratulate again the new officers. I really enjoyed my term as chair and learned a lot, as I mentioned last month. I'd like to thank Mr. Kelly for his support as vice chair, Mr. Bernstein as former chair of the BOR, Mr. Grable and your entire staff were very helpful and collaborative as well. I learned a lot through the process. And just lastly, Chair Santos, Mr. Green, and Mr. Kehoe were very supportive last year at this time when I reached out to them just for guidance and thoughts on how to approach the role. So thank you all. That's it.
Okay, Mr. Green?
Again, thanks to Keith Knox for doing a great job as chair last year. I was glad to advise you on the strength of your tequila after board meetings. And so I hope that was helpful information. And welcome aboard, Mr. Miller. It's great to have you here. Thanks for joining the team. Also, another huge thank you to Linda, as always, for keeping us on track. And to Chair Santos, it's an honor working with you. Glad to be here and be a support however I can. So thank you all. Happy New Year, Feliz Año Nuevo. Looking forward to a great year here at LACERA. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kehoe?
Thank you very much. I share in all the comments. Thank you, Mr. Knox, for an excellent chairship last year. And Mr. Santos, congratulations. And I'm looking forward to this year ahead of us. And a special goodbye to Carol, who is retiring. We had announced in the previous committee meeting, and I am very sad to lose her, but very proud and happy of her being able to move on to retirement. So thank you all, and looking forward to working with everyone this year.
Thank you, Mr. Kehoe. Ms. Greenwood?
Hi. I too want to echo everyone's comments so far. Thank you, Keith, for doing such an outstanding job next year. Herman, you have big shoes to fill. Welcome, Mr. Miller, to what is an outstanding board of directors. And I hope everyone has or had a wonderful new year and stays safe and healthy.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
Yes. Again, congratulations to Carol and the new adventure of retirement. Much thanks for making my first few months a very good one. Appreciate the tone and tenor and tempo, Keith, of your chairmanship, very much so. And then kudos once again to the interns. It seems like it was just yesterday, 25 years ago, where very similar presentation and all, so I can appreciate the heightened sense of being in the spotlight and a chance to do all that great work with your team, John. So kudos to you for integrating them in, and then just wish everyone a healthy, happy start to the new year. And I'm sure this year's investing environment will be much different than last year's.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Yeah, again, I'd just like to thank everyone for the well wishes, and I would like to congratulate Carol. I haven't had the opportunity to work with you, but I'm very, very happy with everything I've heard here today about you. So good luck in your retirement.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly? Mr. Kelly, you're on mute.
Sorry, I wanted to thank Mr. Knox and Mr. Bernstein for serving with them. It was an honor. Congratulations to the new officers. Welcome, Mr. Miller and Carol. Retirement is adult me time, and you will love it. I wanted to thank Jude and Esmeralda particularly for this meeting, for just positioning my questions. And finally, today is National Pharmacist Day. I don't know if you knew that, but we have a lot of pharmacists that serve the constituents of this great county, and I wanted to recognize them and honor them today. They played an important role in my life in the last 15 months. I want to make sure we acknowledge their important role in the county of Los Angeles. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Sanchez?
Yes, well, I want to pile on and congratulate Carol. I am very sad to see you go, and very happy for you. And I would like to welcome Mr. Miller, and I will certainly be available, and I would be happy to reach out to you and give you my perspectives if you want them. Everybody knows I give everybody my perspectives, so I don't want you to feel left out. And I think kind of as regards the kind of earlier comments, I want to just applaud Mr. Kryman at being very responsive, and I think taking such a measured approach to what has been an extraordinary situation. And although we are certainly not at the end of it, I'd like to just take a moment to reflect at how far we've come as an organization that actually had no access to email outside of of your offices before the pandemic to graduating up to being able to work remotely and being able to operate virtually. And I just want to, and I think our resilience has been tested and we have met the challenge. And I just really want to take a moment to reflect that, because that is an incredible accomplishment, particularly for Mr. Kryman, who came in and this was his first major crisis. So I just want to thank you for all of the work you've done to keep this organization going efficiently and to commend your sensitivity to our staff and to us as board members. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And next I will call on Santos Crayman.
Thank you, Trustee Sanchez, for those kind words, and whatever success I've had is really a direct reflection of my staff and not only my senior management team, but Mr. Grable and Mr. Rice. I'd like to, and JJ, quite frankly, I'd just like to recognize them specifically. We have come a long way, and we are at a different place now than we were when we first started back in March of 2020. So thank you for that recognition. I wanted to also ask that we adjourn in the memory of one of our staff members that passed away late December. His name is Freddie Verzosa. I'm hoping that I pronounced that correctly. He, from all evidence in all the discussions I had with staff, he had a very, very special place at LACERA, incredibly positive individual, very focused in on our members' well-being, always went above and beyond, not only helping our members, but helping to guide our newer staff, as well as making sure that he shared his knowledge and his wisdom of our systems and our processes with his colleagues. It's interesting that yesterday I was looking at some calculations and some spreadsheets that Freddie actually developed to assist our members in determining what their purchase agreements would be for other public service. And I can tell you that it was very well done in terms of the technical aspects of it and the information that you draw from it. So his memory will definitely live beyond his time here, but I did want to recognize him and request that we adjourn in his memory and send out our best wishes and prayers to his family and his children. So with that, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Stephen Rice.
I have nothing to add. Thanks.
Thank you. And John Grable.
Thanks, Linda. And I have to start by thanking Mr. Kelly. My father's a pharmacist, so I need to call him up after this meeting to, it's National Pharmacist Day. I'm sure it'll be news to him. Congratulations again, Carol. Very excited for you. And I'll try to remove the smile from my face now, in that I'm both happy and sad in that there's another personnel announcement that I'll make. On a personal level, I'm very excited for this person, that person being David Chu. David is leaving us at the end of the month to join a Chinese venture capital fund as a partner. Personally thrilled for David. I think it's, recognition of his incredible skills and capability. As representing the investment office, sad in multiple dimensions. One, David is a key leader on our team. He's a mentor. He is a friend, someone who inspires us to continuously raise our game. I think he's built some phenomenal successes within our investment program. So I recognize all that David's done, and I'm going to share a couple numbers with trustees just to try to crystallize what David has done in his current role, which is overseeing our private equity co-investments and secondaries. In July 2019, that program was brought in-house. Like everything David does, it was done in a very methodical and structured and organized way, including building a team beneath him, or alongside him, I should say. Since that time, LACERA, we've put to work about $600 million in private equity co-investments and secondaries. Since that point in time, our benchmark for private equity has returned annualized 18.5%. So that's one number. The next number is 30.5%. So 12% higher than that benchmark. And that's what our private equity program as a whole has done. Congratulations, Chris Wagner, for all the good work there. But there's one other number, which is 43.5%. That 43.5% is the co-investment and secondary program that we brought in-house, overseen by David. So that's 43.5% over 30% over 18%. So in terms of delivering alpha, and I think there's a conference, on TV that we see called Delivering Alpha. Well, David Chu delivered alpha to LACERA and our members, and the number's probably higher than that because I know that there's some built-in gains that have yet to be marked, but that's fantastic. And the whole discussion today about allocator to best-in-class investor, well, David's loss is kind of cutting bone, unfortunately, and you'll be missed, David. But with that said, personally, I'm thrilled for you and nothing but success. So thank you, David.
Thank you. Next, I will call on Chair Santos.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Linda. Yeah, I have a few comments, but I would like to start with Mr. Shu's departure. I am also very, very happy for you. Very proud of you. The work that you have done for the organization has been tremendous. I'm gonna tell you that I'm grateful as a beneficiary, and I'm sure all the beneficiaries, the whole 100, I think we're close to 170,000 beneficiaries, including the retirees. You have done really well, but of course, I got to tell you that it was a little selfish in your part because you also a beneficiary. So thank you for that. It was tremendous. I had the great fortune of watching you in action in China. I was very impressed to see the level of contacts, connections, your knowledge of the region. And it was reflective because I know you lived, even though you were born in the United States, educated in the United States, you spent about 10 years in Shanghai working in private equity. And the fact is that there was a number of people that I have met that were very complimentary of the work that you did during those 10 years that you were in China. So it's a tremendous loss for us, but wishing you the best, and hopefully someday you decide to come back to LACERA and improve the number of years you have and improve the benefit that you will get if you come back. But it has been a pleasure, Mr. Shu, and we need people like yourself, people not only that know as I said, the region, but also the language. I think is very, very important. You're in full command, and it was just so impressive to see you operate, and coupled with the numbers that you have delivered for us has been tremendous. And with that, I want to address this to Mr. Clement and Mr. Grable. This is, I've been talking about this for months now. of my fear that we were going to lose top people like Mr. Shu. It is happening. I've seen it happen before in 2008 and before that. This is a little different because a lot more people are opting to put the walking shoes because they can get work better work life, allow people to work from home and things of that nature, and definitely the salary. So I'm asking the CEO, the CIO, and HR, and whoever, my colleagues on the board, that we really need to reevaluate the compensation package that we pay our staff. We need to start thinking and operating like a 74 billion fund, not like a 25 billion fund. We should be able to think about incentives for the employees. It's very important, a good way to retain people. I know it's a tough political pill, but it's, we're 74 billion. We big kahunas, and we need to operate like that. So I really want you to take a look at that as expeditiously as possible. I know the CEO has the authority for $150 million discretionary. But perhaps I will encourage you to retain a compensation, wage analysis compensation firm. If $150,000 is not enough, you have to come back to the board right away. We cannot delay this because it's happening. It's happening in my office. We have lost tremendous amount of lawyers, and this is happening in the highly compensated professional positions all around our country. And so we need to take action on that. I would like to thank Mr. Knox for your service and the previous officers. Great job, appreciate it. Also, wish Carol happy retirement. You deserve it. It is wonderful to know that we have such a great benefit in LACERA, and good luck with that. Enjoy every penny of it. You deserve it. And then I really appreciate the new policy that we implemented in selecting the officers. It was a lot smoother than the previous years, and there is no political bruises that I think of, because this is what we agree on, and it's a very orderly way to for the change of the guard, so to speak. And there was no objection to the transfer of power. I will. Linda is going to send out a survey asking my colleagues for your preferences in terms of the committee assignments. Quite frankly, I tell you now that I'm going to try to keep as many people that are already in those committees, unless you tell me that you wanted out of that particular committee. But consistency and stability in those committees is really important. And the goal here, when we first initiated the subcommittees, was for people to improve the subject matter knowledge, and so therefore keeping people stable in those committees, I think is important for all of us. Also, Happy New Year. Be safe. This pandemic is driving us all crazy, especially my family has taken a major hit. It's really sad, especially no offense to anybody who lives in Orange County, but my relatives in Orange County, Jesus Christ, they're all infected. This pandemic is causing a lot of friction within our families. I know in my family, we are having a difficult time because some of my relatives, God bless their soul, they just think that they're stronger than this pandemic, and they don't think that vaccination is the right way to go. And it's tearing our family apart. And now they're all infected, and hopefully everybody survives. But many of them, including one young lady who's pregnant and is now vaccinated, and having gone through that with my own daughter, who I was able to get her vaccinated. The risk for pregnant women and this infection is very, very high. So I just hope and pray, and I ask all my colleagues here who are religious to please say a prayer for my family, because they are going to really serious situation, and hopefully they all survive. Thank you very much. And unless there's any further comments, unless Mr. Shu, would you like to say a few words? Be final words?
Yes, no, thank you, Mr. Grable and Mr. Santos, for those kind words, and congratulations, Chair Santos and the rest of the elected officials. I almost cried, but I held it back. Thank you guys for, the opportunity for me to maybe just say a few thanks on what is maybe my last BOI meeting. So the first thanks I'd like to give is to Chris Wagner. Thank you for hiring me, or being part of the team that hired me. Chris is the best boss I've ever had. He's a big reason, why the PE group has been so successful. He helps to make sure we're all rowing in the same direction. And I think, I just wanted to, thank him, today. Also want to thank John Grable for his leadership and for empowering, the team so we could undertake a program such as the in-house program that has been mentioned. Thank you and Chris for also promoting me so that, I would have this opportunity, and we'll always be grateful for that. The next group I'd like to thank is the deals team. And these are the people, my colleagues who work alongside me on the co-investments and secondaries. A lot of the credit is given to me, but they are the big reason why the program has been a success as well. And so I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge Calvin Chang, Cheryl Liu, Didier Acevedo, and Derek Kong. I'm very excited for them. I think they're going to, take the program to even greater heights. So, stay tuned for that. And lastly, I want to thank the board for the opportunity, to launch this program. Hopefully, the success of the program it's a LACERA-wide, success, and hopefully it shows the entrepreneurial spirit, an example of the entrepreneurial spirit that lies within the team and the talent. And it's been a privilege and honor to work at LACERA. And while I may be departing, Carol and I will be rooting, we'll be the #1 LACERA fans as, when I retire in a few years, hopefully those retirement checks will be nice and fat and waiting for me. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Shu. I don't see any requests for further comments at this time. We're going to go into executive session. So let's take a 10-minute break. Linda, if you can tell us exactly what time you want to be back.
Let's be back at 11:57.
11:57. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.